Today is NBA Draft Day, and I think we could be looking at one of the more interesting first rounds of the last 5 years, with a lot of questions in terms of the player movement outside of the top two picks, and it seems like the trade buzz has been louder than ever. I'm recording this at 4 o'clock Eastern Time on the day of the draft, so it's starting in around 4 hours. By the time this is uploaded, an hour and a half later, there might be some moves that have been made. Hopefully it doesn't shake up the order too much so this mock draft can still seem somewhat reasonable. We're going through the entire thing, all 2 rounds, all 59 picks. There are no trades. Obviously, there will be some deals tonight. A team like Brooklyn probably will not end up picking 5 times in the first round. And keep in mind, this is a predictive mock draft, what I believe will happen, but I'll be sharing my thoughts if I agree or disagree with the following selections. The Mavericks at number 1. This was kind of a tough choice for me. Cooper Flagg, an intriguing option. I was down to him and Hunter Dickinson out of Kansas at this spot, but ultimately I slightly lean Cooper Flagg with the pick here. I think he is the modern prototype that you look for at the forward spot. 6'9", 220 plus pounds, NBA level body, someone who's athletic, who can guard multiple positions, shot making upside, can get to the cup. I think he's the exact type of forward you look for in today's game. And I think for all the number 1 picks in the last 10, 15-ish years, I think he is the highest floor because he's obviously a net positive offensively. He's one of the better offensive prospects in this draft. And then he's just really complete defensively. I think the ceiling is quite high, maybe not as high as the likes of, say, Victor Wembanyama. But I think his floor and his overall impact to winning basketball is as high as we've seen in a long time. He is as complete as it gets at the forward spot. Number 2, the Spurs pick Dylan Harper. Certainly a strange fit, you could argue, with De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle. And if the Spurs knew this was going to happen, they probably would have never made the move for De'Aaron Fox, who could theoretically be traded again, potentially. Nonetheless, Harper's the clear choice here. He's the best player on the board, 6'6" guard who can get to the cup, crafty with the ball, shot-making potential, solid playmaker. He's the second best player in the draft. It seems like the Spurs are going to make this choice and not overthink it, which I think is the correct call. Get the best player on the board and figure out the fit later. The draft really starts at 3 with the 76ers. This pick could be traded. Maybe they move out to get away from the Paul George contract. I've seen Atlanta linked to this spot. I've seen New Orleans linked to this spot. I've seen Utah linked to it. If the Sixers stay, which I think is more than likely what will happen, but not a gimme, there are a few different ways they could go. After the draft lottery, we kind of assume that Ace Bailey will be the favorite. I kind of have him crossed off here entirely. I think it'll be either VJ Edgecombe or Trey Johnson. And the reason why I think Johnson is in play here is because I think he's Daryl Morey's type, a 6'6", combo guard who can create his own shot better than anybody in the class. He can play on the ball. He can play off the ball. He screams Daryl Morey to me, but the Sixers already kind of have that type of player with Tyrese Maxey, a Daryl Morey draft pick that ended up being a big hit, with Jared McCain, a Daryl Morey draft pick that ended up hitting, Quentin Grimes potentially as well. So I think they lean towards Edgecombe, a slightly undersized wing, who's a really impressive athlete, very good in transition. You like what he brings defensively, really good around the rim offensively. The shooting certainly has to improve. It's not really there yet, but I think with all the shooting and scoring that Philadelphia has, I think him with a smaller role on that offense, eventually leading gradually into something bigger, I think could really work. Kon Knueppel to the Charlotte Hornets at number 4. I like the idea of them adding a connective offensive piece, maybe not necessarily with the ceiling of Trey Johnson, Ace Bailey, or Jeremiah Fears, but I think Knueppel just gives them someone who can help them win games. This Charlotte team has been so bad for so long. They have their lead guard with LaMelo Ball. They have their lead wing scorer with Brandon Miller. Both of those guys have to be a lot more efficient. Part of that is their own shot selection and shot making, but I think another part of it is the other guys you have around him, and having someone like Knueppel who can space the floor, catch and shoot guy, makes winning plays. I like the fit for Charlotte, even if the athleticism limits his ceiling to never being an all-star. I think you're looking at someone who could certainly contribute for winning basketball. Trey Johnson at the Jazz. I think if Trey falls here at number 5, the Jazz should run the pick up to the podium. I think the fit makes a lot of sense here. If you look at the Jazz roster, they have a lot of young players, but they really don't have any great prospects who move the needle. And if you look at the players that Danny Ainge has drafted in the first round over the last 3 years, and there's a lot of them, how many of them are you 100% sure, without question, will be an NBA rotation player in 5 years? I think the only one for me is Walker Kessler because he's such a good rim protector. And even he has been floated in trade rumors for the last 2 years. Not to mention he's going to be on the last year of his deal anyway. The Jazz have some other interesting young pieces, but we haven't really seen enough from them. Taylor Hendricks was obviously unlucky given that he got injured in like the third game of the year last season, but he wasn't that impressive as a rookie. Keontae George, really inefficient despite the shot-making upside. Isaiah Collier, good playmaker, but other than that, what does he really bring, at least based on what we saw last year? Cody Williams is there. That's probably the nicest thing I can say about his season last year. So I think adding a guy like Trey Johnson, who can be the lead scorer early on, makes a lot of sense. I really like his physical profile. 6'6", 6'10" wingspan. He doesn't need the ball to be successful. He can create his own shot with the ball. He can get open, pick his spot without the ball. Now, other than the shot making, the rest of this game is very much a work in progress, but I think he's the type of player who can tap into it. Not a great finisher around the rim, but I think with his size and length, he could get there. Playmaking feel isn't great. Ideally, in the long term, you have another lead ball handler. Maybe that player ends up being Isaiah Collier. In a perfect world, I did like Collier a lot as a prospect a season ago, so maybe that could be the case. Defensively, Trey Johnson really doesn't have it at all yet, but I think with his long arms, he has the tools to potentially be good on that end of the floor. I think I would have Trey Johnson as my third-ranked prospect in the draft, certainly behind Flagg and Harper. It's close between him and some of the other guys in that range, but I think the shot making makes him a really intriguing player, and the hope is that he turns into a Devin Booker, Tyrese Maxey type, and I think that's really what the Jazz could be looking for. Ace Bailey goes number 6 to the Wizards. He is certainly the big wild card of this draft. He could go in the top 5. I don't think it would be to one of those top 5 teams. I think one of Washington, New Orleans, or the Nets would look to trade up. Brooklyn probably being the most likely, given that they had those 5 first-round picks. But I do have Washington getting him at number 6, given that this is where he ends up falling. And if he's on the board, I don't think the Wizards are going to pass him up. It seems like Ace Bailey wants to be one of the focal points offensively early on. I can see why that's the case, because I feel like on a team like the 76ers who's trying to win games, he would look kind of lost out there, because other than the shot-making flashes, there's not really a whole lot to suggest that he's going to impact winning early on. He's got the tools defensively, but he's not great on that end of the floor. Not really someone you want handling the ball. Doesn't really have good playmaking ability, and his lack of feel for me is a big concern, which is why I probably would not pick Ace Bailey in the top 5, and I don't think this is some crazy steal for the Wizards. But with his size, length, and shot-making potential, I see the avenue where he becomes a really good player. I just kind of think it's going to be a much bigger uphill battle than a lot of people think. But in Washington, he can be one of the go-to scorers right away. I like the way the Wizards have built their roster. I think they've drafted well over the last couple of years, but they don't necessarily have that lead scoring type. Bailey can get as many shots up as he wants early on, so I kind of see why him and his camp would rather go to a team like the Wizards or the Nets. Jeremiah Fear is at number 7 to the Pelicans. I know they just traded for Jordan Poole the other day. I don't really think trading for Jordan Poole changes your draft philosophy too much. Fears is a dynamic on-ball player who needs the ball in his hands to be successful, so it might be a little bit of an awkward fit with guys like Poole and Zion Williamson as well. But this is a guy who reclassified. He entered college basketball a year early, so basically a high school senior last year, still making some of the ridiculous upside plays that we saw. The flashes are definitely there with him. The question is, can he potentially carve out a role playing off the ball at any point? My rule with on-ball players, I've recently called it the Trae Young rule. Trae Young was obviously ridiculous in college. One of the questions with him was his lack of size, his lack of ability off the ball. Unless you end up becoming as good of a player as Trae Young, or at least close to that, then will you be able to be a winning player in the NBA? That's my question with Jeremiah Fears. I think he's got the potential to be that down the line, but probably will need some refining. Kaman Maluach to the Nets at number 8. I think if this is how the board plays out, this feels like a really easy pick for Brooklyn. I think he's pretty clearly the best consensus prospect on the board, and in terms of value, I don't have a problem with it at all. I would probably rank him somewhere between 5 and 7. Intriguing offensive player. Defensively, not perfect, but he's got the physical tools to be quite good there. I would love to see him try to add an outside game offensively because he doesn't really provide anything as a playmaker. So if he can potentially, not even just consistent three-point shooting, but someone who can be effective in the mid-range, I think that would be a very useful addition to his offensive arsenal. I think for a team like the Nets, you have time to develop him. Brooklyn's probably not going to be very good for a little bit, so I think this would be a solid choice for them. Noah Essengie to the Toronto Raptors at 9. I really like this kid's profile. I think he's a top 5 to 6 prospect in the draft because of his overall ceiling. You look at the defensive versatility, you look at the offensive flashes. I think there's some shot-making potential with him. And at 6'9", the size makes him really intriguing. To me, he screams a Masai Ujiri type pick. In his interview yesterday, the 3 players he compared himself to was Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and Kawhi Leonard. What do those guys have in common? You guessed it. They played for the Toronto Raptors and were on their 2019 championship team. Scotty Barnes, I think he mentioned as well. He kind of fits that prototype too. So I think, to me, this screams Toronto Raptor pick. If Essengie is there at 9, I think he will and probably should be the pick. And then at number 10, Derek Queen to the Phoenix Suns. I've got some questions about Queen. He's a fun player, obviously a good scorer, someone with intriguing playmaking potential, but I do wonder if he can be anything above like a poor man's Domantas Sabonis, who's obviously a good player. He's been an all-star level guy over the last few years, but how much has Sabonis really helped the Kings win basketball games? Already being pretty much the best version of his archetype, I don't think Derek Queen will quite hit that level. How much will his style of play contribute to winning unless he becomes a great offensive player or improves defensively? Because right now the rim protection just isn't really there in his game. So as much as he's a fun player and he has a unique skill set, I do kind of wonder how he's going to translate to the next level. I don't think I would use a top 10 pick on him, but I think in Phoenix, a team is probably not going to have a lot of pressure to win games. I think he could have a pretty fun two-man game with Devin Booker, as long as they keep him, which personally I'm hoping they don't, but as long as he's there, which might be for a little while, I think those two could be an intriguing duo. Let's get weird here at number 11. Cedric Coward to the Portland Trailblazers, probably earlier than you've ever seen him go. But I'm kind of all in on him being a lottery pick. This is a guy who started his career in Division III, played at Eastern Washington for a couple years, transferred up to Washington State where he was good last year, although he only played in 6 games. Not much of a sample playing against high-level competition, so obviously that's a big question. But you look at a guy who has gotten better rapidly. That's something that NBA teams care about. I don't think we've seen a rise quite like this since Jalen Williams a few years ago out of Santa Clara. He went earlier than people expected, number 12 to OKC, and here we are 3 years later. He was the second option on the team that won the NBA Finals. So I think it worked out pretty well for Oklahoma City. Coward is 6'6". He's big. I think he plays bigger than his size. Good shooter. You hope that there's some long-term shot making in his game. I think Portland, though, to be the team who takes the shot on him would be pretty interesting. They've obviously got a good defensive nucleus. They've got a couple of talented young guards. I'd be curious to see how they develop him because the lack of games against high-end competition is certainly a worry. But with his track record of getting a lot better in a really quick amount of time, I think NBA teams are going to like that, and he goes earlier than you think. Thomas Sorber to the Bulls at number 12. I like his game. He's sort of a tweener in the sense that he's 6'10". He plays the 5, but he doesn't necessarily have elite center size. Not really some fantastic rim protection profile. I don't think he has the shooting or quickness to play the 4, so that kind of worries you a little bit. But I think he's got good feel for the game. I think he's an underrated playmaker, can score a little bit. I don't think he's a bad defender. It's just that I don't think he'll ever be elite on that end of the floor. But I like the fit here in Chicago, and if he can develop an outside shot, kind of like the current Bulls center, Nikola Vucevic, then I think he could end up being a strong player at the next level who sticks around. Carter Bryant to the Hawks. I like his skill set. He didn't really have much offensive responsibility last year with the Wildcats, but this is somebody who can shoot the ball, Not really a guy who you're going to have creating his own shot, but guess what? Atlanta has Trae Young, who's a great shot maker for himself and for others. I think this team could use some spacing. They have Dyson Daniels, Zachary Rizache, Jalen Johnson. Those are all good players, but none of them are like great shooters, at least not yet. Maybe Rizache gets there one day. But I like what Carter Bryant can potentially bring offensively, but you're really drafting him here for the defensive profile, a guy who can guard multiple positions, high-level defender on the perimeter. Obviously, Trae Young is a bad defender, but they have surrounded him with a lot of guys who can guard at a high level. Dyson Daniels just won the most improved player, for Christ's sake. I think with this addition and with the acquisition of Kristaps Porzingis, the Hawks, to me, are a team who skips the play-in entirely next year and can make the playoffs. I really like their roster, and I think Carter Bryant would be a good addition. Collin Murray-Boyles to the Spurs at number 14. He's definitely a tweener, a 6'7" big, weighs in at almost 250. I like his feel for the game. I think he can be a great role player, not entirely too dissimilar to a guy like Jeremy Sohan. I think if he can play a similar role for the Spurs, then this could be a pretty worthwhile pick. They don't need to be swinging for the fences anymore. You have your number one in Wemby. You have Stephon Castle, who just won the Rookie of the Year. You have Fox. You have Dylan Harper. I think getting a guy like Collin Murray-Boyles here makes a lot of sense. A few other really good role players going with the next couple of picks. We'll start with Rasheer Fleming to the Thunder, who are looking to trade into the top 10. I think that would make a lot of sense for the Thunder. I think they should absolutely look to do that. They don't need 3 picks. They don't need 2 first-rounders this year. They don't need to fill out their roster because everybody on their championship team, I believe, is under contract for next year. So I think going up into the top 10, getting a higher-end prospect, maybe like a Noah Issengue or a Kaman Maluach, if they possibly could, I think would make a lot of sense. But given that I don't have any trades here, they'll stick with Rasheer Fleming. He, much like Collin Murray-Boyles, I think is going to be a really good role player. 6'9", impressive athlete, guards multiple positions. If the shooting can improve, then I think he's a guy who's going to play somewhat big-ish minutes early on. And then while we're on the subject of really good connective offensive pieces as role players, we look at Nick Clifford from Colorado State going to the Grizzlies. Memphis is a team who quietly has drafted really well over the last 5 years. Their scouting department has done a terrific job, and I fully trust them with a guy like Nick Clifford, who I'm really high on. I think he belongs in the lottery. He was one of the best players in college basketball a season ago. I think you have shades of Josh Hart in the sense that he plays big, good rebounder, someone who can shoot the ball, play make a little bit. I think kind of the Josh Hart role for Nick Clifford with maybe more potential would be a great pick here for the Grizzlies. Danny Wolf is a fascinating player for me. I don't think I would pick him this high. His skill set is fun. It's definitely fun. A 7-foot point guard. But I just kind of think he's more of a flyer you take in like the early second round. Defensively, he's not really a rim protector. Offensively, sure, the playmaking is fun, but he's not going to be the lead playmaker on an NBA team. It's a little different in college at Michigan, where he was the best player on their team. That's not going to be the case in the NBA. So he's going to have to be more of a traditional 5. I don't really know if he can do that, but I think it would be fun for Minnesota to take the shot on a perimeter-oriented offensive big, especially with Naz Reid being a free agent. Kasparas Jakučionis to the Wizards at 18. This might feel a little bit low. He probably should go a little bit higher than this. I don't really know what he provides off the ball, though. Kind of what we talked about with Jeremiah Fears, and I don't think he's the shot maker that Fears is. I think he is a good playmaker, though. Decision-making can be a little bit iffy, but I think he's one of the better pure passers in this class. He's got good size. I think the scoring potential is certainly there. And I think him and Bub Carrington would be a fun backcourt. I think Bub is a guy who can play off the ball. Ideally, Jakučionis can potentially develop into a guy who can play off the ball. I think given his size, that's not really the question. It's more so his skill set. Igor Demin to the Nets at number 19 is a really interesting one. He's a 6'9" hybrid guard forward, really good playmaker. I don't really think he has any other great skills, though, and to me, I think this is a little bit early, but I think some team is going to love the combination of size and playmaking. Not a great scorer, though. Defensively, maybe he could get there, given his size. Can he play off the ball? I don't really know. I kind of see a poor man's Josh Giddey with him, and there's still a lot of questions if Giddey even helps winning basketball, and I don't think Demin is even on that level. So I do have a lot of questions. I think the ceiling could be pretty high, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot going against him. A guy who I do really believe in, who I would probably pick over the three guys ahead, maybe not over Jacques Jonas, but certainly Wolf and Demon, is Walter Clayton Jr., who I have going to the Miami Heat at number 20. A gutsy shot maker, one of the best shooters in the draft. You hope that his game becomes a little bit more well-rounded. It's not like he's some great defensive player. The playmaking isn't really there yet. But I think he'd be fun in Miami as a microwave scorer off the bench with the hope of him potentially being a little bit more. We saw them draft someone who has some similarities in Tyler Hero, turn him into an all-star. So maybe Walter Clayton can maybe not be an all-star, but have a somewhat similar career trajectory. As for the end of the first round, I've got Ryan Kalkbrenner to the Jazz at number 21. The hope is that the defense sticks in the NBA like it has with a guy like Walker Kessler. Terrific rim defender, terrific shot blocker. I like his offensive game, though. He's super efficient as a scorer around the basket. He can stretch the floor a little bit. The shooting has improved slightly every year. I believe in him as a potential rotation guy at the next level. I think he could be pretty good. Liam McNeely to the Nets at number 22 was certainly up and down, especially in terms of his overall efficiency this year at UConn, but a guy who you hope can be a good long-term three-point shooter at the next level. Will Riley, kind of a similar deal. I think he could be a really good 3-and-D guy at the next level. Inconsistent at times this year at Illinois, but I think we saw some more flashes towards the end of the year, and I think for the Pelicans, it would be a solid choice. Ben Serif to the Thunder at number 24, a talented 6'6 guard. The question is, will he be on the ball? Will he be off the ball? I think given his 6'6 measurables, there is certainly the size. He'd be able to handle, I think, playing without the ball. It's just about being able to make that consistent impact. I do wonder if he would probably stay overseas. I think maybe the Thunder would want that, given that their roster is kind of complete. Nolan Traore to the Magic at 25. Coming into the year, he looked like a top 10 pick, but was really inconsistent. I think there is some intriguing stuff to be excited about with his game, though. Really athletic, really quick. You hope the playmaking can be consistent. The shooting isn't really there yet, but could be down the line. I think adding another high upside guard could make a lot of sense for an Orlando team who looks pretty good, but maybe could use another guard or two to potentially help them out. Cam Jones to the Nets. This is their fourth round pick. Again, I don't think they're going to keep all these picks. They could certainly look to package them up for a guy like Ace Bailey. If not, I think you try to move a pick like this for maybe some heavily protected future pick, give you more long-term flexibility. I don't know how many teams are going to be looking to trade future first-round picks for draft choices in the late 20s, unless it is super protected. I do like Cam Jones, though. He's a guy who's played a few different roles at Marquette, has contributed just about everywhere for them. And then Adu Firo from Arkansas, kind of the same deal, 6'8", big, physical forward. If the shooting improves, I think he could be a pretty good player at the next level. Asa Newell to the Celtics. He's certainly talented. He's just kind of a tweener. Kind of similar to Thomas Sorber in the way that, you know, he doesn't really present himself as a rim-protecting 5. Probably a little too big and janky to be a regular 4. I think Sorber's just a little bit more polished, a little bit more well-rounded. Newell, I think, is a little bit more athletic. So kind of pick your poison there, I guess. I think Boston could be a fun spot, though, where he looks to develop. Noah Penda to the Suns at number 29. Talented player from France. If the jump shot gets there, I think he could be pretty intriguing. And then Johan Beringer, another kid from France going to the Clippers. I think he's worth a first-round pick. I think he's a pogo stick-level athlete. You really like the upside with him as a rim protector. Doesn't really provide a whole lot else outside of around the basket. There's not really a ton there yet. I think he could be a good long-term backup, though, for a guy like Ivica Zubac if he can reach his ceiling. As for the second round, we'll try to move quick, go through some of the notable picks here. I like Kobe Bryant and Elijah Martin to the Wolves and the Celtics. I think both of those guys have a chance to be NBA contributors. For Bryant, he's probably the best pure catch-and-shoot guy in the draft. Never hurts as a contender to add more spacing. And then Elijah Martin plays like a chip on his shoulder. He's got that dog in him. He's undersized at 6'2", but he's a good defender, and the hope is that the size doesn't limit him at the next level. Really interesting pick at number 33 with Jace Richardson, who has been a first-round pick throughout the entire season. He did not get a green room invite, and it seems like the hype with him has just really slowed down over the last month or so. Maybe it's a little bit bold to have him out of the first round entirely, Pretty sure I did get Kyle Filipowski falling into the second round correctly last year, and I could see the same thing with Jace Richardson, who is a very talented player, but he's an undersized combo guard. I know Fanspo has him listed at 6'3". I think he's more like 6'1", maybe 6'2". Now, I do like that he plays on and off the ball at a high level, but will he be able to in the NBA? He's not necessarily a true point guard, and at 6'1", you kind of have to be at the next level. Off the ball, sure, he did a good job of that at Michigan State, but at 6'1", how much of an off-ball threat will he be at the next level? So the size certainly creates some questions. It's clear that he's a first-round talent, but I just kind of think the size could really hold him back for NBA teams. If he does make it to the second round, though, I think he's too good to fall past like the first couple of picks. And sure enough, Charlotte gets certainly a first-round talent. The next pick we're going to go over is Rocco Zikarsky to the Nets. Given that they have 6 picks, they don't want to add 6 guys to their roster. A draft and stash guy makes sense. Zikarsky is 7'3", 7'4" maybe. Super talented, but has a ways to go. I'd really like Sion James to the Pistons at 37. Gets you a winner, a guy who contributes to winning basketball. Gritty, hard-nosed role player. I think for a team like Detroit, you don't necessarily need to take the swing on upside here. Rather, why not try to get a guy who can enter the rotation? Ryan Nembhard staying in Canada, going to the Raptors, I think would be pretty fun. He is arguably the best passer in the draft, averaged nearly 10 assists a game. Maxime Reynaud to the Pelicans at 40, I think is a good pick. Probably ends up going higher than this. This is just kind of how the board played out, but averaging 20 and 10 with a 3-ball. Hard to imagine he goes too much later than this as a 7-footer. Amari Williams to Golden State gets some, speaking of 7-footers, finally some much-needed size. I'm intrigued by Tyrese Proctor. I think he could end up being really good value in the second round because he's really learned how to play off the ball. He's learned how to be a catch-and-shoot threat, and we've seen him play on the ball with some good spurts. So he's a guy who I think has a really good chance to be one of the better players of the second round. Mark Sears to Milwaukee is kind of fun. Kind of similar as a prospect to a guy like Jalen Brunson. I certainly don't see him being that good. But an undersized playmaker who can really score the ball, I think would be a fun pick for the Bucks. Hanson Young to the Cavs is interesting. Another guy who probably goes earlier than this, given that there's a lot of potential. I mean, his skill set at his size is really exciting. Did not play against the best of competition, but I think here in the 40s, it would be worth the gamble. And then in the 50s, some of my late picks who I really like include Javon Small from West Virginia. I think him and the Pacers is just such a good fit. I think there's a lot of similarities to Andrew Nembhard, a guy who I think is really good. With Small, you're getting a tough, physical, gritty defender, very prototypical of the West Virginia guards. And I like what he can provide as a shooter. I think he can play with and without the ball. All of those things describe Andrew Nembhard to a T. So I think he kind of gives the Pacers another version of that. And then RJ Lewis, that's the last pick we'll go over to the Lakers. Certainly at a rocky end of the season, getting benched in the tournament game for St. John's. But if the defense can improve, we know the shooting is there. LeBron likes playing with guys who can space the floor and knock down the 3-ball, as does Luka. So I think RJ Lewis, if he ends up being pretty good, would be a nice fit with this Lakers group. That'll wrap up the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know which picks you agree with and disagree with down below in the comments. Given all of the possible trade rumors, this could certainly be blown up as soon as like the 3rd pick if the Sixers trade out or make a surprising pick. Maybe they pick Ace Bailey after all. That would be kind of funny. But make sure to leave a like. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.